Hello everybody, I'm David Phillips and this is Show and Tell. Today we are on Lower Commercial Street in Wellfleet outside Brehmer Graphics, where printmaker Bethia Brehmer has invited us in to see how she makes etchings. So here we are inside your studio and gallery and house combination. This is your showroom, right?
Right, exactly.
And on the wall here we have a picture called Cocoon 2. Would you say this is a representative example of your work?
Yes, it is.
It's an etching, right?
Right.
How does that work?
An etching is done on a sheet of copper or some other metal, and the copper is covered over with an acid resist called a hard ground or some other substance, and one scratches through the ground, and then the whole thing is put into acid, and the acid eats into the metal. Then it's cleaned off and inked up and printed on a press.
So when we see a line like this or like that, what's happened is that this represents a place where your knife has cut through the coating,
right,
and bitten into the copper.
Right.
This looks like a very complex method.
It is.
Why do you use this method instead of?
It's the whole quality of the thing. There's a sort of a line that you don't get in any other medium that you get in an etching.
That's certainly true. So all this begins then with the sketch pad, right?
A lot of artists work that way. I tend to work directly on the plate. I do a very sketchy preliminary drawing over the ground and then work right on the plate, usually from a subject matter that I have in front of me or from a photograph.
So this whole thing just came out of your head. There was no sketch pad involved,
No,
right?
but there's a lot of thinking involved.
I bet there is. So really we shouldn't say it begins with a sketch pad. We should say it begins with a sheet of copper.
Right.
So let's go next and see where the copper is, okay?
Right.
So this is a sheet of copper, right?
Right.
This is the kind of copper that you use for your plates.
Yes.
Is it pure copper?
It certainly is.
Why do you use copper and not zinc or steel? I used to do a lot of work on steel.
For one thing, there's an acid to use with copper that works a lot better. I tend to do a lot of things with fine lines, and the acid that I use bites straight down as opposed to the other acids that are used for other metals that tend to spread out. And also just working on the plate, it's so beautiful when you're cutting into it to get this wonderful shiny copper color.
These little dents and so forth, you'll be able to
right,
tap them out from the back?
That will have to be done before this is used. It's an industrial grade copper, which is cheaper, but one has to do a little work on it. Okay,
let's take this down here. We've blocked out all your windows with wood so the light wouldn't come and dazzle our cameras. This is the saw then that you use to cut it to the shape you want. You have a cutout that's already been done.
Right. I like to use a lot of unusual shapes, and copper tends to come in nice rectangular shapes, but if you want something of this sort, it has to be done either with a jeweler's saw or this saw, which takes about half as much time.
Well, why don't you turn it on?
If you're ready for a lot of noise,
we're ready.
Here we go.
Put on your safety goggles and let's go.
Voila.
that certainly is noisy. Now, here, I want to hold this right side up, right? This is a piece called Environment, and I see these sawtooth edges here. You cut the plate that way, right?
Exactly. Some people think this was an actual blade of a saw, but it's not. It's a piece of copper, which was cut like that.
Why did you choose to cut it instead of, you could simply have with the instruments that you use, you could have made this a white space by...
Right. Art is nothing, I think, unless it is the subtleties that you get with something like this. Now, in an etching, when it's printed, the plate is pushed right into the paper, so you get an embossed edge here, and that's part of the quality of this particular print.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. We're going to go back into the studio now, and we're going to see exactly how you do all that. So here we are in your studio, and we have a plate here. This is not the same plate that you cut, but it's a similar plate. What's the next step?
The next step is to bevel the edges on the plate so that it won't cut the blanket.
Do that with a file?
Yes, with this.
Go ahead. Crunch, crunch, crunch.
A little noisy. And also to round the corners, which can be difficult.
Okay, and what's next? You begin applying the ground?
Right. The ground comes in several forms, but the form I like is a ball.
This is made of wax and asphalt.
Right.
And you just buy little ingots like that.
Right. So the plate is put on some heat source. I use just a regular hot plate.
That's not a special artist hot plate.
No.
Good for toast and so forth. And then you just smear it on. It looks like the stuff they put on the roads, which is, I guess, also asphaltum.
Right.
And it just all smears around. So there isn't really very much on any plate. It's all very thin.
Right. It has to be just the right thickness or it'd be hard to go through. It also has to be hot enough so that it melts, but not too hot so that it
And you
burns.
scoop it off with a spatula. I like that part.
Instead of burning one's fingers, yes.
And so let me just show the comparison. This is an untreated plate, and this is a treated plate. You can see that it's darker and ready to be engraved, or not engraved, ready to be scooped out. Here we've got a finished plate. You can see it's a very intricate and elaborate. You can see the lettering, all done backwards, and you did that without a sketch, just freehand backwards.
Right. Lots of time and lots of concentration.
Very impressive. This, as you can see, is a large octagonal plate. You didn't heat this on a little burner, did you?
Yes, I did. Piecemeal.
Piecemeal.
Right.
Well, that must have taken quite a while. Let's take this down now and take a look at some of the tools that you use. What's your main tool for doing that?
This is an etching needle, which is actually a dental instrument. My father is a retired dentist, and in our class it was suggested that we could use dental instruments. So I had a wonderful source for it.
So this is your main tool for drawing, I guess, equivalent of drawing.
Exactly.
And this here?
That's a burnisher. And
how does that work? Show us how it works.
That's used to take an area of the plate down. Say you've got a rough area on the plate,
Yeah.
and it's a scratch that's going to show up. With a little oil, one rubs down the surface until it becomes flat, so there's nothing to catch the ink.
And how about this?
This is a scraper. It's similar. It's used for deeper areas that you really need to gouge the plate out to get rid of deeper depressions in the plate. This goes somewhat like that.
Good. And this here?
That's called a roulette, and that's used to rough up the plate. It's also run over the surface, and
That's the kind of instrument. Let's see if we can get it really close in there. This little wheel is a similar kind of wheel to what's used on a cigarette lighter. So we can't really see the scorings on it, but there it is.
Great.
And what else do we have? That's about all of those. You want to show us just a little bit with a plate that has some ground in it, how these work?
Yes, this is a grounded plate, and the only thing one needs to do is just get through the ground, which is basically very waxy. It can be done in a very free sort of manner. I tend to work in a very tight way, going over my lines a lot, but all that one needs to do is get through the ground, and then the acid does the rest of the work.
So you don't really have to push hard, like
Absolutely
even
not.
though you're not really cutting metal. You're cutting metal a little bit,
Not
but
much.
the acid cuts the metal. All you cut is the ground.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, now you'll be able to get rid of this, won't you? We haven't damaged the plate.
No, right.
How would you get rid of it?
Take the ground off and go over it with a burnisher.
For here, we have a large jug which says pure honey on the top, but
It's not.
it's not pure honey. It's not even adulterated honey, I bet.
Very
What
far
is it?
from it. It's Dutch mordant, which is a combination of potassium chlorate crystals and hydrochloric acid and water.
And it's not really Dutch. It's domestic Dutch mordant.
Right. It's prepared right here on the premises.
Okay, now this is hydrochloric acid. This is the way it comes through UPS.
Right.
I bet the UPS delivery loves to stop at your house.
Yes.
So let's open this up. And inside, here we go. We have, it says hydrochloric acid, danger, causes burns, may be fatal if swallowed. So there's no swallowing of hydrochloric acid going on around here. And so you add it to the potassium.
Chlorate crystals,
What
yes.
does that do to it? It changes it in some way. All right. And why do you use hydrochloric acid instead of nitric acid?
Nitric acid is used a great deal, but it makes the line that spreads out much more. The hydrochloric acid, Dutch mordant tends to eat straight down, so you get a finer line, and I do a lot of things with lines, so it's real important to me to get good line quality.
Do you ever use nitric acid?
I use it when I teach because it's very fast, and my students like it because they can get it all done in about 10 minutes. But for my own work, it's several hours in the acid bath.
Yeah, it takes you longer than that. All right. Shall we dip something in to see how it works?
This is a plate that's grounded, has a little design on it, and it also has the back covered.
Don't splash it on me now.
Right.
You put your fingers in there. That's amazing to me.
As long as you take your fingers out immediately, it doesn't hurt them, although it's not the best idea probably anyway.
Okay, now we'll pretend this has been in here for a long time. And then you just scoop it out.
Being very
Whoa.
careful so that it doesn't splash.
You wouldn't catch me putting my fingers in hydrochloric acid.
Probably smart not to.
Why is it green? This is white and yet that's green.
As the acid works on the plates, it turns color. The darker it gets, the weaker it is, the longer it's been used.
So the copper has turned it green, the same way it turned the Statue of Liberty green.
The next step is to dampen the paper. It needs to be put in a bath of water so that it gets soft and will conform to the edge of the plate when it goes through the press.
How long does it stay in the water?
It depends on the paper. Some paper stays in for a long period of time. Some paper is almost like a blotter. It soaks up the water instantly.
So now we're going to do the inking of the plate. The plate is on the work table, which with the hot plate underneath. So the plate is sort of warm by now, right?
Right.
And the table is in fact quite warm.
Mm-hmm. It makes the ink run better, so it helps in inking the plate if it's warmer.
Good. Let's begin. Scoop it up with one of these bits of mat board.
We do a lot of recycling here. Bits of mat board and phone books, whatever's at hand.
And you just sort of scrape it in the places that you want to be purple. And you leave it off the places that you want to be orange.
Right. This is a 3-color print, but I want to get everything blended. The colors will all go together, merge together uniformly, hopefully.
Look like a European banknote.
Well, I haven't gotten into trying that, but it's probably a good idea. The idea is to get the ink into all of the crevices and at the same time start wiping it off of the surface of the plate. In this particular print, it's important to blend the colors between the various areas. If one doesn't do this carefully, you end up with very harsh lines, which are very distracting.
Let's see if we can get the camera in real close on that.
This tends to be a fairly skillful sort of job. I find some people catch on to inking fairly well and other people have a lot of trouble with it. And if it's not done well, it's the difference between having a print that looks very good and one that looks sloppy, or the colors are not bright, or the print may be streaky. And here we have a phone book and continuing to wipe the colors off of the plate. Paper from the phone book seems to be particularly good because it's not as absorbent. You want to be quite careful not to get the ink out of the lines, but to just get it off of the surface of the plate.
So while we've been inking, the paper's been soaking, and now it's time to take it out.
It starts out very wet. The point is to get it dry on the surface, but keep it damp so that it will stay soft. So it gets put between blotters.
So tell us a little bit about paper and how you select it and what you look for in a paper.
These are 3 different kinds of paper that I use. The one on the top is called Murillo. It's a very heavy paper, and it works very well for embossing. It comes from Italy. The one in the middle here is Arche, and it's kind of a nice warm off-white color. It's a bit lighter paper. And the one in the back is Reeves, which also comes from France. They're all very good quality papers, and they all take etching very well. They're made specifically for that.
Now these are rag papers.
Right.
Why is that important?
It's important to have the quality of the paper because it'll last a long time.
And this is the press then, Beth, over which you are draped like an odalisque.
Right.
This is a power press.
Yes.
It doesn't have the big wheels that you ordinarily associate with an etching press.
Right. It's a little easier to maneuver.
And tell us what the controls are and how they work.
This is the off-on switch. If you push it this way, the press goes this way. If you push it that way, it goes the other way.
And this?
That regulates the pressure. That actually raises, there's a large roller up here. It raises it up or lowers it down, and there are 2 of them so that you keep it even on both sides.
And how do you determine how much pressure you need?
It's a lot trial and error. Once you've done a particular thickness of plate, you know how much to use. But if you use thicker plates, you raise it up and lower it down depending.
And now we've inked the plate and we've wet the paper and we're ready to print.
First we put a piece of paper down on the bed of the press. Next is the plate put on top of this paper. And finally we have the paper here that has been blotted. It's just damp but not wet, that goes on top of this paper. And then there are the blankets on the press, which are actually felt. There are at least 2 of them. Everything's laid down flat, and then we push the button. Now comes the exciting part, seeing what we've actually got. There's the print hot off of the bed of the press.
There it is. Terrific.
Inked a la poupée.
And where do you put it to dry?
I have a set of screens here, which I leave it to dry in for several days.
Why do you use screens?
It gets the air around it and dries it as quickly as possible. I was usually anxious for these things.
And here is Linda Vagan-Hildreth with the plate for Cocoon 2. Whoops. Let's bring it in here. We got it. We got it. This took an hour to ink.
Right.
Why did it take so long?
Partly because there's so many different areas in it, and one has to be very careful to see, for instance, that the green doesn't get into the yellow area, and particularly up in this area with the lotus, the colors are right close together, so it's a very meticulous job.
Now, it's taken an hour to do it, and you're going to print it, and then it'll be gone. You'll have to ink it again.
Absolutely. It has to be re-inked each time it's printed.
That means when you have an edition of 150, that's 150 hours of inking only.
Right. Fortunately, it doesn't have to be done all at once. The edition tends to be done over maybe a long period of time.
Okay, well, why don't we lay this in the press and print it and see what it looks like?
Fine.
Oh, there it is. Very dramatic. And there it is. Another copy of the etching we saw in your showroom when we came in. So we've been working in hard ground up to now, but there are other techniques too, right?
Right.
This is soft ground. How does this differ from hard ground?
It's almost self-explanatory. It's much softer than hard ground. It's greasy. It actually doesn't get hard.
Oh, yeah.
So this is put on the plate in a very thin layer, and then various substances like leaves or other textures are embedded in it.
So you choose a soft ground when you want to vary the texture.
Right.
And how about this? This is aquatint. What's this made of?
It's made of powdered rosin, and it's used to get a tone on the plate. And sometimes it's applied with a bag like this and just dusted on the plate, just like...
A rosin bag.
Yes.
So in the off-season you can use it for baseball.
Is that what you use it for?
That's what you use it for. Can we get in close now on the lotus up here and show us perhaps what the different techniques are?
This is a hard ground area. This was all drawn through the ground with the etching needle. And right next to it, the second step was putting a soft ground on, which is the fern area here.
Is that a real fern?
It's a real fern that was run through the press on top of a soft ground, yes,
and
taken
these
off.
stippling bits in here.
That is what the rosin, the aquatint looks like.
Now, engraving is a different you don't use any ground at all for engraving.
Right.
So
Engraving is not actually etching. It's done dry, in other words, without acid. It's actually gouged into the plate.
For dollar bills and stock certificates.
That
and so
is
forth.
what we use here, yes.
Okay. Now this is embossing. There's no ink at all involved in this. How does this done?
Part of it is a very deeply etched plate
Uh-huh.
that's just not inked, and the other part is collograph.
This is the plate.
Right. It's all
Which
been
you-
cut out, of course.
Cut out. And this is the collograph. Let's see if we can get in close on this. This is mat board.
Right, which has been cut with an X-Acto blade.
And you don't have to do this one backwards because...
Because you can flip it over, as
And-
I discovered after I did it.
And paste it
backwards.
onto
Another sheet of
onto
mat
another
board.
sheet.
Right.
And then, of course, the actual ink plate, which goes in the center. And then, finally, as a pièce de résistance here, this is printing on fabric. This is a kimono, which Beth has made, velvet, and etching on the back.
Yes, it's actually etching. It's not silkscreen. It's etching.
Well, you've taught us an awful lot, and I want to thank you for letting us come in here and upset your life with our television crew.
It was delightful.
Beth Brehmer of Brehmer Graphics. And I'm David Phillips. This has been Show and Tell. And if you want to be on Show and Tell, if you have something interesting or beautiful to show, write to me at Box 88 Truro or call me at 349-2727. And thanks for watching.